In this video, we're discussing the suffering of the cross on Good Friday. I'm standing in the complex of the Holy Sepulchre. And the Holy Sepulchre has historically had commemorations both to the crucifixion and the resurrection, as you're going to hear Dean Richard speak in a few minutes. During the medieval period, in fact, there were three main commemorations in this complex, and two of them had to do with the Holy Cross. Of course, the tomb of Christ, where he was buried and rose on the third day on Easter. Of course, the place of Golgotha, the place of Jesus' crucifixion. But there was also a third commemoration that has always been very closely connected to this space. And when pilgrims came throughout the Middle Ages, they would come for the relic of the Holy Cross and the story of Hellenus finding the Holy Cross, as well as the crucifixion and the resurrection. So two of the three main commemorations dealt with the cross. The idea is that when they dug out a Roman temple here, at the very, very bottom, they found the actual three crosses of the crucifixion. And through a miracle story of laying the true cross on a sick person who then became healed, they found out which of the crosses was that of Jesus. Egeria, the 4th century Spanish pilgrim, a woman who was here in the 380s, she writes that on Good Friday they would actually bring out the relic of the Holy Cross, probably very close to the space that we're in now, and they would let pilgrims venerate the relic. But she says, on the table on either side there was a priest and a deacon holding the relic in order to make sure that none of the pilgrims bit a piece of the cross and took it home in their mouth. It's actually a funny story that we have in the historic sources in this actual pilgrim text, even though we might wonder why a pilgrim would actually want to bite the cross. They would want that because the relic itself was always associated with healing. It was the true cross. Even the story I told about the cross of Jesus healing a sick person. The Piacenza pilgrim who was here in the 6th century talks about the same relic when it was on display and was open to the sky. He would talk about how oil would miraculously surface on the top of the relic. Now, I don't want to be flippant, but rather than think about how we as pilgrims want to take a bite out of the life-saving cross as a souvenir, perhaps on Good Friday, we should think more in terms of how the cross sometimes, if not always, takes a bite out of us. I'm not talking about the Christian story per se, but the cross as a symbol of death, suffering, and execution. We see how death and resurrection go together. We see how on this very same space we commemorate the crucifixion, but also the resurrection. And even the image of the cross has both of these concepts. It's life-giving, but it's also a cross of suffering and death. As part of our courses, generally on the very last day, we do the Via Dolorosa, or the Way of the Cross, finishing right here on this rooftop, this monastic space now used by the Ethiopians. And I've often, as we accompany pilgrims, after a long, intense 10, 14-day journey through the footsteps of Jesus, we see how that experience often takes a bite out of them. Walking with Jesus to Calvary, feeling his pain and his sorrows, takes an emotional, spiritual, and mental toll even on our pilgrims. We finish the Via Dolorosa imagining the real time being Good Friday or the actual day of the crucifixion. And we know that it's a time that pilgrims struggle with. But pilgrimage here in the Holy Land is not meant to be always perfect or always beautiful. It's a time to come and allow the struggles in our life to come up to the surface, to feel how Christ's journey to the cross accompanies our own journey of faith as well. And so the pilgrim sites help help mirror what's going on in both our outward and inward life. But just as I said, the pilgrims want to take a piece of the life-giving souvenir home with them because it does become a symbol of victory. We have to live through those moments of when the cross takes a piece of us. We will see Christ's body broken on that cross, and we know how we too, as pilgrims, as Christians, as humans living in our human condition, are often broken. But that's what Holy Land pilgrimage does. It's a microcosm of our lives, and these shrines, as holy and as sacred as they are, teaches us or reminds us about the darknesses of our life and how the light will shine in them. It's not always a mountaintop experience, but here at the Holy Sepulchre, we live the entirety of the journey, even in 3 days. If anything, on our pilgrimages, we rush too quickly from the Via Dolorosa moment and the crucifixion of Christ to going on the bus to Emmaus and celebrating the resurrection. As you listen and watch to this video series, we invite you to pause, to reflect upon the Good Friday moment, the suffering of the cross, before you go too quickly to the Easter sunrise service, the Eastern sunrise moment that we will, through the hope, death, and resurrection of Christ, experience on Easter morning.
The cross of Christ and the tomb of Christ are inseparable. One without the other simply does not do enough. Crucifixion without resurrection, or resurrection without crucifixion, tear at the heart of the gospel itself. And on Good Friday, our attention turns specifically to the cross. And here we are on the roof of the Holy Sepulchre because we cannot gain entrance because all the major holy sites in Jerusalem are closed at present. Even the church itself has two different names. In the West, we tend to call it the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, the Church of the Tomb. But in the Orthodox tradition, it's known as the Anastasis, the Church of the Resurrection. But inside the church are both sites of the crucifixion and the tomb, contained within the one building itself. And you can see the tomb from the chapel of Golgotha, and you can see the chapel from the tomb. They are intimately connected, and we must never exclude one in favor of the other. And we must never try to flood the Good Friday story with the light of the resurrection. We must stop and look and contemplate the truth of the cross, the suffering that Christ takes on himself, the suffering of the world, the sin of the world, of all of us, if you like. That contemplation of the cross means that we also must take seriously the suffering of the world and not turn a blind eye, turn away, walk the other side, walk in the other direction. A Russian Orthodox priest, Saint Silouan the Athonite, said, "Keep your mind in hell, but do not despair." And he's not simply trying to say we should have a negative, pessimistic view of life, not at all. I think what he's saying is, don't avert your eyes to the reality of what's going on in our world. But don't despair, because the truth of the resurrection ultimately helps us to find a way to understand and engage with human suffering. Here in the Church of the Resurrection, we commemorate that suffering. We stay with Christ, as it were, at the foot of the cross to take seriously his suffering and the suffering of the world. And here in the land of the Holy One, it feels like we're stuck in that suffering, and it is all too easy to despair. Already 2.5 years into this, the peoples of these lands are suffering so terribly. In Iran, in Beirut, throughout the Lebanon, in all the countries of the Gulf, there is fear, there is suffering, there is death. There are missiles flying all over the skies here in Jerusalem, and some of them are landing in the land, in other parts of the land, in Israel. Jewish people here are terrified. Everybody is frightened and has their own story of why they're afraid. And we need a story that helps us to deal with that fear and that suffering, that doesn't diminish it, doesn't dismiss it. For us as Christians, we feel that that suffering is transfigured by the gift of God, of Jesus Christ, that his Son, God himself, would take the suffering upon God's self so that human life is transfigured. We cannot make it all better. We cannot simply make the suffering go away. But we know that whatever we have suffered, Christ suffers too. Christ is with us in these days of suffering. But also the light and the hope of resurrection just shine dimly in the distance, reminding us never to lose hope, never to despair, never to give up. Throughout these films, we're using the beautiful hymn, My Song is Love Unknown. And it is really the great hymn of suffering. And it is the hymn of Good Friday, though it's good to sing it any time. And that hymn contemplates this suffering of Good Friday, but doesn't dwell on it in a macabre way. That beautiful line, love to the loveless shown, that they might lovely be, is exactly that idea of the transfiguration of suffering as we are taken into the death of Christ, that we may be taken into the life of Christ as well.